I am so thrilled to say that we have three special guests here today on the Salesforce Healthcare User Group to talk about digital process automation for the industries. And with that, I'm going to hand this over to Rob. Rob, can you introduce yourself and your team?
Thank you, Tina. Yes, thanks very much. And thanks to everyone on the call today and for all that you do to support Salesforce and our ever-expanding community of customers, partners, employees, and stakeholders. Our businesses depends upon you, and we really appreciate your commitment to our customers, products, and services. We're going to kind of introduce ourselves as we go. So I'm going to kick us off, and then I'll hand it over to Dean, and then Dean over to Mark. So we'll rather than doing formal introductions now, we'll just kind of in-stream intros, okay, just to keep things moving along. So my name is Rob Marino. I'm an account executive here on the HLS team at Salesforce Industries. I've been part of the team for over 2 years and have an extensive background providing technology, software, and solutions to the payer markets throughout North America. So North America being US and, of course, our good friends up north in Canada. Today, our focus is on digital process automation, a new product offering for Salesforce, but far from a new product. What we're showcasing today is the technology developed by Velocity, which was acquired by Salesforce in June of 2020. We're excited to now be able to deploy this technology throughout our HLS accounts, such that Health Cloud customers can now leverage many of the benefits previously limited to Velocity-only accounts. We continue to have a growing portfolio of our industry solutions, so many of you may already be working with this technology, but to everyone else, DPA is now available for non-Velocity accounts, so they too can reap the benefits of this technology. So let's tee this up and get on with the topic of the day. Dean, if you would, advance, please. Okay, so as we all know, the speed of change is happening way faster than ever before in history, driven by three main factors. There's many, but three primary factors: customer expectations, technology challenges, and siloed, outdated legacy systems that handcuff businesses and IT executives globally and across industries. We all form decisions every day about the businesses we choose to work with, or not, driven a lot by our digital experiences. Where we like them, we frequent them, and where we don't, we don't. In my own personal experience, just yesterday, I wasted 30 minutes of my day in a chat with a healthcare vendor because their clunky online claim submission platform resulted in my legitimate claim being denied. Imagine such a thing, right? Well, not only was the system a problem, but the chat rep was clearly looking at a different system than I was and was instructing me to do things that I could not do and to look at things that I couldn't even see. So you can guess my impression of that company and my desire to ever use that platform again. So driven by this dramatic change in customer expectations, businesses are struggling, as we all know, to deploy scalable, automated, intuitive digital solutions to meet this demand. Next slide, please. As we know, the digital imperatives impact every industry, not just healthcare. Consumer online interactions increased by over 18%, with 80% of business buyers expecting to conduct even more business online. Consumers and business buyers are spending more time in their home office, living room, less time in physical stores or offices, accelerating demand and timetable for digital transformation. We can see in this chart that every industry is impacted by these digital trends, with an exploding delivery economy, online self-service capabilities, teleconference augmenting human-to-human interactions. We have a very big challenge in front of us to deliver those digital platforms quickly, efficiently, and easily. We could, next slide. Today, we're introducing to you digital process automation. DPA is the next level business agility for Salesforce, providing click-based configuration and integration tools that simplify the build and delivery of branded and automated customer experiences. DPA simplifies complex rules at scale with multiple conditions and actions, allowing organizations to set up multiple permutations and combinations. With DPA, you can orchestrate end-to-end workflows, syncing the data to underlying calculation engines, processing the rules, and easily writing the data back to the source system, be it a Salesforce platform or an external third-party system. DPA also enables end-to-end documentation automation, incorporating technology for seamless creation, document management, and document generation. DPA enables quick configuration, reduced design and testing, speed to market, reducing the tech debt associated with customizing Salesforce, and promotes build once, use often, consistent user experiences deployable across channels. The bottom line is DPA breaks down technology silos, promotes world-class digital experiences that can be delivered quickly at scale, creating easy and fun to use internal and external digital platforms. You're going to see a lot more of this today as Dean and Mark get wound up here in just a sec. So next slide. I'll wrap it up here on this slide. So what? Great stuff, Rob. Why does all this matter, right? Well, it matters because it enables really 4 main themes. I mean, there's a lot of things I could list here, but I picked on efficiency within the organization, clicks not code configuration, minimizing custom code, creating reusable, consistent experiences that easily adapt as the business needs change. And again, we'll show you a little bit of this as Dean takes over and starts into his presentation. Cost savings, reduced design development time, less technology debt, lower future costs for upgrades and revisions. Accelerating transformation, pre-built industry-specific templates, reduced time to market, reusable across channels. Our platforms deploy in weeks or months, not years or multiple years. Automation, eliminates manual processes, simplifies logical workflows, end-to-end process automation. 4 key reasons why CEOs, CIOs, and others in business will listen to solutions built around this platform. DPA allows you to quickly and efficiently deploy world-class user experiences across industry. Today, DPA is separately licensed as a product or is bundled into any Salesforce Industries product bundle. To learn more about how to get DPA into your installation, you can contact your core Salesforce rep or your Salesforce Industries account executive assigned to your Salesforce account team. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Dean, and we're going to dig in deeper on DPA. Thank you.
All right. Yep. Hey, thanks, Rob, and thanks to everyone that joined. My name is Dean Fischesser. I work in the architecture part of the Salesforce Industries solution. My background back in 2000, I started with Siebel and had my first exposure both to CRM at the time, but also more importantly to this conversation, declarative solutions, right? Where we got away from writing code. I used to write RPG code of all things, but got into this system and these ecosystem of tools that allow for us to change attributes and properties about an object and allow for that to render the functionality that we deliver out to the users. So since that 2000 experience at Siebel, I stayed at Siebel, eventually became Oracle, saw various aspects of what Oracle called declarative, and then spent some time at Microsoft working on Microsoft Dynamics as well. And I think, like most of us on the call, we all know the best cloud declarative platform that's out there is Salesforce. And what I want to show to you today is some additional declarative capabilities that DPA adds to that platform. So we keep hearing this term DPA, as Rob had mentioned. You may also hear it called OmniStudio, and it's kind of used synonymously at times, and I'll try to differentiate what the pieces of that actually are. So when we look at what we define as digital process automation, it certainly includes OmniStudio, as we see here on the screen, but then it also includes intelligent document automation, which is a tool, a capability to process inbound documents, whether they're scanned documents or fax documents, extract the data off of those documents and deliver that data into fields that live within inside of a Salesforce object. It also allows for us to generate documents so that we can take the data that we're either collecting in a process or data that lives inside of a Salesforce object and deliver that out through a merging process into a templated document. So think a Word template And we have merge fields that add the values from the various fields within Salesforce, or values I capture within what we'll talk about in a moment, which is OmniScript, and delivers out a document that you can email, fax, or use through DocuSign with your customer. And then lastly, on the lower right, you see a data processing engine. That's something new to the DPA/OmniStudio architecture that allows for a better and quicker and more scalable roll-up fields within the ecosystem of the Salesforce objects. But what I really want to focus on today, because this is really the core of when people start talking about what was velocity, what is velocity, what's OmniStudio, what's DPA, most of them tend to fall into the components that make up OmniStudio. And those components are comprised by these and a few others that I don't emphasize in a presentation at this depth. But these are the components that you'll hear talked about. Salesforce Ben, by the way, if people subscribe to his blog, you'll see some recent articles kind of talking about aspects of DPA and OmniStudio, and he'll focus on these four components typically. There's the two components that are primarily related to data access, and one has a cool name, and that's Data Raptor. Data Raptors, we'll see in a moment, basically manipulate and update Salesforce data. And then we have something called integration procedures, and the only thing I want to kind of warn about that is that's not trying to replace the integration layer as a whole, but allowing for communication from the Salesforce server into those other API-driven solutions from an integration perspective without writing any Apex code, so done in a declarative way. And then on the right side, we have two UI or user interface components, and that's what we call OmniScript, which is a guided process that steps someone through an interaction of data collection or data presentation. And then flex cards, which flex cards allow for us to get creative and sophisticated UI presentations out to the Salesforce UI. So taking it beyond what we might have with a page layout or dynamic forms, and allowing for us to get much more creative about the way that we present data, the way that we interact with data, within a Salesforce Lightning app, on a community page, or within a mobile app. So I'd like to kind of break down what I just talked about and kind of put the pieces together. So if we think about these two things that the user may interact with, a flex card on the left and an OmniScript on the right, what's really happening is that those two engines are interacting with JSON data. So they're either consuming JSON data to present within the OmniScript or the flex card, or they're collecting and updating data through the interaction with the user. And this is an abstraction layer that's important to think about when we start thinking about, well, what's the difference between this and other aspects of the core platform and how we can extend into guided processes or user interactions. Now, we know that we can get JSON from some of the standard methods that you can within Salesforce, an Apex class, a SOQL statement, a SOSL search, etc., streaming API. But what we introduced are two additional data retrieval and data access items, which is Data Raptor, and then that integration procedure as we talked about on the previous screen. Now, Data Raptor's purpose is to allow for us to retrieve and update complex data from the Salesforce objects. So cross objects that maybe don't have any lookup relationships, I can bring together in a single data retrieval, or very hierarchical data. So imagine that I want to go get some data that is a parent, has some children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and I'm going to bring all that data back. Typically, if I wanted to do that in a data retrieval method, I'd probably find myself dipping into Apex code to go write that. Integration procedures do that as well. However, they can sequence steps within the process, and they can call one or more data raptors. But what they also lend itself to is to call out to other systems via REST or SOAP APIs. So we can call out there to an external system, grab the data, and create those integrations declaratively, so that we're not writing Apex code. Nothing wrong with writing Apex code. We're just trying to allow for that to be, we'll say, the last resort, to do that only when necessary. So that's what these tools really focus on trying to deliver to the platform. And in that process, I may be getting data that comes from more than one place and maybe want to mash it up within the integration procedure. So merging data that came from multiple systems, some of it might be Salesforce data, merged in or mashed up with data from an external system, and delivering that out as if it came from one place into the flex card in the OmniScript, and also being able to take whatever updates are made and then push it back out to those external systems as well. Data raptors, a couple key takeaways. We won't see a lot of detail about data raptors today, but I think Mark will show a data raptor, and then we'll go into seeing a demo of a flex card in an OmniScript. A couple key things to take away from the data raptors: again, cross-object data retrieval or update, as well as hierarchical data that you can retrieve through a declarative user interface. And then also the data raptor that retrieved all this data or would update data can be surfaced as an API. So kind of a coarse-grained API where we're not dealing with some of the complexities that you might need with just talking to the object API and putting the responsibility on whatever that client is that's calling that API to manipulate the data, make a subsequent call, etc. A data raptor can allow for you to do that in a single request and go get data from multiple objects or update data from multiple objects with a single call. And then integration procedure is kind of the same thing, right? Is that we might sequence a data retrieval. Maybe we manipulate that data a little bit because the hierarchy of data we wanted to flatten. So that's something we can typically do within an integration procedure. There's calculation capabilities. So to do some math within this process without having to write code to do that. That's the calculation procedures and calculation matrices. And then ultimately maybe update an external system and send a response back to the application. Likewise, these can be surfaced as REST endpoints as well. Now, this is just a quick screenshot of something that I was doing, is taking a pretty simple retrieval of data between two objects and doing it in Data Raptor on the right. So you get a simple look into what the Data Raptor UI looks like. And then it has in-tool testing. So I can test what the output of that request is going to look like. So I see a nice structured JSON hierarchy there. Now on the left, what I'm doing is trying to diagnose what I wrote in a Apex class and looking at debug logs, right, within Dev Console. So night and day difference, right, from the ability for me to see whether I got the right data and whether that data is structured properly. Now, moving on to kind of the user interface pieces away from those data access components, we want to look at, well, what do we already have, right? We have this low code to pro code type of continuum. We can create page layouts, flow, Lightning Web Components, Apex classes on the far right. We don't do anything to prevent you to continue to use these components. And we interact with these components as well. We can call an Apex class as a data source. But what we introduce is these two additional UI choices.
Hey, Dean, I apologize. I raised my hand, but there's not me to look at. I raised my hand. So it's like me putting a comment in the chat. I can't. Anyways, I'd like to interrupt and ask a question if I could.
Oh, you're the host, right? Certainly.
Yeah, I know, but I was just like, I raised my hand, but I'm not there to call on myself.
I saw that. Yep, got you. Okay.
I'm like, I could post a comment, but then anyways. Yeah. So yes, a quick question. With the move from Velocity to OmniStudio, there is one time the education material is behind the partner portal. We have a majority of consultants with some customers running in here. Is the training for the part of what you just reviewed and what you're about to review, is all the training material successfully been migrated to Trailhead, so that for those when we're going to need to do deeper discovery and education on that? Or is that, so I just want to call that out because some of this, because the nature of an hour, there's a lot of great stuff to follow up, but has everything been migrated over for a deeper dive in Trailhead, or are we still needing to look at some of those from the partner, going the partner route?
Yeah, I predicted you would ask that, Gina, and it is on an upcoming slide.
I will be quiet. Thank you. Sorry, Dean.
No problem. I kind of point this out as that we truly need to look at the X and Y axis to understand that flex cards allow for us a little bit more effort, right? Still not coding. We deliver almost the same capabilities that you'd have in a Lightning Web Component. In OmniScripts, everyone will say, well, those are similar to Flow. Yes, but it adds some capabilities that we'll talk about here in a moment that kind of drive us to say that with a little more effort of an OmniScript, and I'd almost say the learning curve on Flow is more challenging at times than it would be on OmniScript, you get some significant additional capabilities and benefit. Now, well, I can already write Lightning Web Components, right? Why do I need this Flex Card or OmniScript designer to do that? I may have not mentioned, but both the activation of an OmniScript or the activation of a Flex Card actually generates a Lightning Web Component, which means that you can deploy as you can any Lightning Web Component. And sure, you can still write Lightning Web Components, and we all know that when we go into VS Code, it creates these 3 files that are empty when we create a new Lightning Web Component, and we end up with something like this, right? So, technical debt that we need to maintain going forward, something that we probably have to put some good comments in so that somebody can actually come back to it and understand what we did or what we meant to do, versus a UI experience that allows for you to design this in a more what you see is what you get type of fashion. So what you see here is the designer that Mark will show that actually will generate something very equivalent to what we see on the right or the left there, which is the Lightning Web Component itself. These are some examples of screens that are different UI presentations of data that were written in Flex Cards. As I'd mentioned, Flex Cards generate a Lightning Web Component. As a result, you might want to interact with that Lightning Web Component. So there's a publish and subscribe framework to allow for you to talk across Flex Cards. There's also a hierarchy of Flex Cards so that if you have a data set that you want to iterate through and generate multiple Flex Cards through an array of data that you retrieved, Flex Cards support that type of richness in their generation and creation. And then OmniScript, the next slide will give us a little bit better sense, but think about process, think about what you might do in Flow, but allows for us to not only deliver out these sequential steps that someone may execute, but do that in a fashion that I can heavily brand it. So this is an example of an actual live customer that branded it with their website branding standards. And it also allows for us to talk to other systems in a way that would typically require more coding or writing of an Apex class within a flow itself. So we consume APIs, and then we allow for that same publish and subscribe type of framework for OmniScripts to talk across other objects such as Flex Cards to pass data back and forth and to execute actions across those different components. It can be deployed on the typical Salesforce channels, so a Lightning app, a community page, or an Experience Cloud page, as well as a mobile app, but can also be delivered off platform. So we can do what's called Omni Out. We can also do that for Flex Cards, where you can run it on a platform that's a web property that's not a Experience Cloud property. And then lastly, there's basically a click-based capability to determine what do I want to track about the user as they interact with my OmniScript or my Flex Card. What buttons did they click on? What pages did they visit? How long were they on a particular step? And this is that continuous feedback loop where we can capture that detail and allow for you to do analytics or reporting off of that, integrating with Google Analytics or Adobe Tracking Manager if desired. And I do see something, yes, Sitecore sites as well. So you saw Adobe up there, but we have customers using Sitecore as well. So, what's an OmniScript? Kind of like a flow, right? We're going to walk through some steps. This is an example that I built. I'm not going to demo the example, but I wanted to demo the use or talk about the use case. So this was a case where a provider had a roster of physicians and they wanted to add a new physician. So they might want to pull back all the current physicians within that practice, then enter in the new physician, capture their education records, capture their certification records, enter any new licenses, right? So, to go do that within the Salesforce UI, we'd be visiting many different screens and clicking the new button several times, where, this is where we'd create an OmniScript to step through each one of those steps, capture that data as we go, and we decide when we need to call back to the server to update the data. So another big benefit of this abstraction is that I kind of have control of when I make a server call. So the first step would have made a call to get a data raptor to get some data about the account and the contacts. Maybe the next step calls out to the NPES registry to validate the NPI number that I entered, to make sure that that was a valid NPI number, and even bring back some data about the physician. The third step maybe goes out and makes sure that as I enter in the name of the schools this physician attended, that I spell them correctly. But I don't want to store that list of medical schools inside of a Salesforce object. So we actually call out to an external service, get that data for the purposes of storing it on the record as a text field, but making sure that, Stanford University was spelled the same every time someone selected it. And then lastly, at the end, we decide, okay, I've got all my data, I validated it to my satisfaction. Let's now go push it out to the object model, or to the objects. And in this case, at the end, we update 6 different objects. And certainly this is, I'll say it's simply calling the object API behind the scenes. So it's enforcing any of the data validation rules that you already have set up within the object model. And then lastly, this would call out to an external system. Maybe you have to report to a state regulatory agency every physician you add to your practice, and that would update the integration procedure to write that data out. So that's kind of a quick flyby of what we're talking about when we talk about DPA. Again, focused heavily onto the OmniStudio pieces of it, because those are really the components that are the tooling that the solutions are built on, and enable the folks like yourselves to build other declarative applications in addition to the core capabilities that already exist within the platform. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark so that he can go ahead and take us into some of the actual product. And you can see examples of flex cards, OmniScripts, data raptors, etc.
Hey, thanks, Dean. Tina, do we have any questions before I jump into the application demonstration?
Right now, everyone's being quiet. Everything's from me. So the rest of y'all, please be jumping in. But one of the things I thought of when you were going through this is, remember how Salesforce Communities, now Experience Cloud, you used to be able to have guest users, right? Guests could come in and interact with information. And now for security reasons, the users have to be authenticated. But with this, is it possible that we could actually reclaim some of the guest functionality that we have that was lost with the communities going the way they did, where you could have interaction on a chosen website where a person can interact with that data, capturing that data, but they don't have to be authenticated? Perhaps, is that a useful use case from that aspect?
Yeah, we do some of that. In fact, just today I was working with the guest user profile. So Tina, I might be missing something as far as I was using the capabilities of the community cloud to have the guest user profile, giving it access to the appropriate objects that I wanted to surface within the OmniScript itself. So as executing an OmniScript as a guest, and then capturing some data and pushing that back to some objects, right? I mean, certainly there's limitations of what we can share out into that that community. But yes, we are capturing that type of data. Think about a Medicare situation where people are shopping on a community, and we want to capture some information about them, but we don't need to ask them to become a member of the site. We can capture that data and follow up with them as a lead.
Great. And then also we still end up having our layers, because it's being a healthcare user group, we're still looking at, we'll be able to enforcing our security and our protocols around that while we're still gathering that information. I think that's one of the things too that's been a struggle in the healthcare arena. It's like, how do we do it in a safe and secure way? Perfect. That was it. Anyone else have any other questions, please? I don't need to be the only one typing questions. Thanks, Mark. If you want to go ahead.
You bet. So, hey, everybody, my name is Mark Spicer. I am a solution engineer here at Salesforce Industries. I joined in January. I actually got my start also, as my friend Dean did, on the Siebel side back in 1997. 1 month after I married my wife, I went out to San Mateo and learned Siebel, and did that for over 20 years. My friend Dean is much wiser than I am, so he jumped ship and made the transition much sooner than I did. I've been I've been over on the Salesforce side now for a couple of years, and only wish that I had done it much sooner. But yeah, I implemented Siebel for a lot of different companies at the time. Siebel was the CRM platform that obviously was bought by the company that most software applications go to die. I won't mention any names, but yeah, I was the last company that I worked for implementing Siebel. They had a call center that was very, very large. It was one of the Fortune 5 companies. And so their call center used it. And I don't know how many of you have been to a call center, but they have, this great big room with all these people with their telesets on, these great big TVs that show the call times, the hold times, and all these statistics that the telesales agents, are rated on, and therefore sometimes compensated based on. So it's extremely important that the software that they use is very efficient and allows them to perform their jobs very quickly. So the application that I'm going to show you is called the Service Engagement Console, and it is used by a lot of our payer call centers to answer calls. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you can see that. Is the resolution okay? Can everybody see that, or do I need to zoom in a little bit?
It looks pretty good to me, Mark.
Yeah, it looks good.
Awesome.
I think it looks good.
So as you'll see here, there's the point that I want to get across is the fact that there is a lot of information that is presented to the telesales agent, and a lot of functionality. So you're going to see that we don't have to navigate away from the page to do really any part of the rep's job. So in the upper left quadrant, we have what's called the contact profile. And this shows that Alan Bartlett has called in, and it shows a map of where they are. This is a Google map that is presented via the Google API. So what we do basically is pass in the address that we have on file for Alan over to Google, and Google passes back the map for Alan. So you'll see his name, his address, phone number, his email. And these 4 little items down here are called action items. And if I click on an action item, for instance, the contact methods, this is going to give me the opportunity, again, without having to navigate away from the screen. I can enter a new phone number, new fax number, and email address. I also have a request a card action item, and that's going to pull up this screen that allows me to, so Alan's requesting a new membership ID card. And so I can go through and make sure that all of the information that I have for Alan is up to date. I've got the correct PCP, as well as the insurance agent and the providers. I see that he's using this RxRS pharmacy. I can make changes to this, or I can say all of this is accurate. Now, one thing I want to point out on this OmniScript, up here in the upper right corner of the page, you see it shows the steps. So right now we're on the first step of this OmniScript, and it's showing the insurance summary. And as I step through this OmniScript, it's going to advance each of these steps. And these steps can be variable. In this particular instance, they're not, but you can have these steps change based on information that's collected, various radio buttons that are selected. So all of this can change based on that. For now, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and I'm going to say next. And it's going to show me a picture of the ID card that we're going to send out to Alan. So I can verify again the information here. If I hover over the card, it's going to show me the back of the card so I can make sure all that's good as well. We show that the next step is going to be the delivery method. So I'll scroll down to the bottom and click next. And it's going to ask, okay, Alan, do you want to have this ID card mailed to you, sent in an email, or do you want to download it to your app? We'll say email and we'll say next. And so we're on the final step and success. We've sent the ID card out. So also we have the new case action item. If I click on that, it gives me the ability to very quickly enter any information that pertain to complaints that Alan may have. Do that very quickly, again, without having to navigate away. So this, as I said, is a flex card. Most of everything that you see on this screen visually is a flex card. The flex cards, as Dean mentioned, they are graphical user elements that are on the screen that can show data from and make updates to data that is either stored within Salesforce or outside of Salesforce. As Dean mentioned, the data wrapper gives us the ability to show and change data to Salesforce, data that is stored in Salesforce, as well as data that is stored outside of Salesforce using an integration procedure. So down a little bit, we have a member card that shows the pharmacy. I can select a new pharmacy by clicking on the action item here. You can also come down and make a quick change to update the PCP. Alan may have called in and said, hey, I want to update my PCP. So we can very quickly, based on the address that Alan is in, we can do a search, and that will return information about doctors that are in his area. So in this case, this made a call out to the NPES and said, hey, show me physicians that are near Alan that we can make changes to. So moving along over to the middle of the screen, we start out with these tabs across the top. We can navigate through each of these tabs, or if we want to, we can just do a quick search. So say, for instance, we wanted to make a change of address. If I just type in change, and I can click on change of address and do that quickly. I can also navigate into each of these tabs and show the case history. So any cases that have been logged previous to the call are shown here as well. If I click on benefits inquiry, so this allows me again to make a call out to an external data source. So for instance, he may be calling in and asking about a specific CPT code, what are my coverages there? So if I just type in, let's say, for instance, he's calling in about an MRI, I can type that in. I do it in caps. And then that's going to come back and it's going to show, a description of what that procedure is, as well as the spending phase and what his coverages are for in-network. So again, representing data that is outside of the organization, as well as inside of Salesforce. The get local providers is shown here. It shows, it defaults to Alan's email address, his telephone number, and where he's located. And I can just do a quick search and show, based on, let's say, for instance, he wants to see a dermatologist. I select that, do next, and again, it makes a call out to the NPES registry and returns with specific doctors with that specialty that are near Alan. The COVID test sites, I can come in here, say Alan's called in and said, hey, I want to know what COVID test sites are near me. So say, for instance, Arizona, it'll come back with a list of all of the COVID test sites that Alan can reach out to. I'll go ahead and click on the next item over here, which is claims. And this is going to show a list of claims that are associated to Alan. So let me go back to the overview here. Again, our goal is to present information to the telesales agent that so that they're able to get information that is valuable to them. I can see here that the member's premium is shown, as well as what the payment method is, how they're paying, the policy number, the employer, what the employer pays. In this little graph here, I see that Alan has currently spent a little over $2,000, and what is the maximum out of pocket, which is $11,500. So I can quickly get information and provide that to Alan. If I click on this coverages action item here, this is going to display a lot of information that is collapsible and really good performance. So say I want to show prescription drug coverage to Alan. This shows the various drugs with the coverage detail and whether it's in network and out of network. I can just collapse each of these items and very quickly get access to the information that Alan might need. I can click on the claims action item. Again, that presents all the claims for this policy. I can click on the dependents action item, and that will show all of Alan's family here, that everyone who is a dependent for the policy. The pre-authorization action item allows me to tell Alan what his pre-authorization requirements are for any particular procedure. If I type in the provider, Joe, this is going to do a look ahead, a type ahead for information that again is retrieved from NPES, and it will give me some options to select from there. Same thing with the diagnosis. If I have a CPT code, I can type that in, and it will do another type ahead and give me some options to choose from there. I'll go ahead and close this out. Down below, we also showed dental and vision, really a lot of the same information that we just saw for medical, so I won't jump into each of those. We do have down below the member card, we have basically what's called the customer story that shows a history of everything that we've had with Alan and his dependents. So again, this is information that allows the telerep to get information for Alan and very efficiently, very quickly answer his questions and fulfill his needs.
Hey, Mark, let's go ahead and pause because we've been chatting up some questions in here, and
Sure.
Dean's been graciously jumping in and trying to he's answering some of these questions. So if y'all haven't been paying attention, we have been putting questions in. Dean
Good.
answered about the provider search, which we just saw. Dean just answered me about permissions, which is interesting. Permissions on the Flex cards is still Salesforce, but also Flex card does have that. Great. Oscar, I think I see something from Oscar. Yeah, Oscar, do you want to ask your question? Come off mute and ask that.
Yeah, Tina, thank you. Yes, what are the considerations when you need to run deployments with these solutions?
Yeah, Oscar. So there's a tool that's called the build tool, which is a command line interface that allows for you to take this metadata and migrate it from dev to test to QA to production. And that's a command line interface. There's also a visual tool called IDX, which allows for you to do kind of a selection of the objects that you want to move. IDX actually accesses the DX commands as well. So you kind of have a UI to even migrate objects from the Salesforce, core objects as well. So you have two different ways to do that. The build tool does have integration with tools such as Capado and Jenkins for scripting and other things to automate that process. But this data that you are seeing Mark use is stored in an object that is a FlexCard object that stores its definition. And you use those tools to migrate that from the different DevOps orgs.
Thank
Oscar,
you.
did that answer your question?
Yes, but you have maybe some efficiency in time.
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Maybe with this solution, you have efficiency in time. Is faster, or is the same time when traditional solutions?
I don't know the answer to that. We probably need to come back to answer that.
Well, if you're talking about development and deployment, they actually have use cases where they've shown that they save days in actually deploying the solution. So I think it's also talking about the efficiency of where you have your normal development and deployment versus where you're using the flex cards, and they actually, you know, it saves time on Lightning Web Components, it saves time on a lot of different things. Is that where you're going for it, Oscar?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, because I was gonna say, guys, you all have, I've seen some of your documentation that is talking about how many days is saved on average, I believe, for like a normal deployment.
Yeah, actually, Mark had that. I think Mark had that slide in there, and I told him it was too salesy, and that he had to pull it out.
Oh my goodness! And Mark listened to you. I think that makes everyone get all giddy. It's like, oh, you can save me this much time actually doing this. I think, but yes, they do have that, Oscar. It actually is there, and Mark can maybe share that out later. Camilo, you have a question? Do you want to come off mute and ask?
Yes, sure.
I see. I'm sorry, Camilo. Proceed.
No, don't worry. Just my question is, when the user, the guest user, is it necessary to assign OmniStudio or DPA license to this user, or what kind of permissions do you need for this user?
So we don't need to assign a license to that user. That's actually one of the test cases that I was working on the past couple of days. We didn't have all of the sharing rules set up properly. So for the guest user profile, so somebody was trying to allocate a license to them. We have licenses, community type licenses, that would not require you to create or allocate a specific OmniStudio DPA license to that. So Rob, it's kind of a licensing question that I'm a little bit, I'll say, not as versed on, but Camilo, we don't need to assign a DPA license to all the guest users.
Yes, you're right. You're right, Dean. Correct.
Perfect. Thank you.
DPA is typically licensed based on the internal users. So it's kind of driven by that. And then you can deploy any of these experiences externally on a portal, on a community, or even on a separate, customer private portal that's non-Salesforce.
Hey, Rob, I got a follow-up question on that. So
Sure.
when you're looking at, if you have 100 users and you have those who are actually going to be doing the configurations, and then you have those who are going to interact with that, for viewing only, like in Health Cloud, you have those who don't need the Health Cloud license, but they need to view the data, but they're not going to interact with it. Mm-hmm. How is that structure? How is that licensing done? Is it every single user who needs to see a Flex card needs to have a OmniStudio license? Or are we looking at platform licenses? And I'm not looking for price. I'm just trying to understand what's that structure, because I'm confused on that.
That's a good question, and it's easy to kind of get jumbled up in some of that, right? There's really two answers. There's two different licensing models. If we deploy like a velocity platform, which OmniStudio is included in velocity platform, that's based on users. So if you're going to have internal users, you got 50 internal users, you get 50 DPA licenses, right? Typically, we're at par with Health Cloud, because generally that's sort of the rule of thumb. If you need 500 Health Cloud licenses, you're probably going to need 500 of these. But when you deploy it, you can deploy experiences like the ones Mark was just showing, the OmniScripts Mark was just showing. You can deploy those on a community, and there's no limit to the number of people that can use those, right? Because you could have 10,000 people out of communities that are looking up their PCP or dropping ID cards. So it's licensed in that scenario, it's licensed internally, and you can deploy it externally. DPA is coming through a new licensing model that's different, that's going to be transactional based. so that when you don't have, you don't want to license a block of users, you'll be able to license it based on a transaction volume. So that's new. It hasn't officially hit the streets yet, but that'll be probably in winter, maybe spring. We'll have that licensing model more trued up and ready for market. But that's really just going to be a pure volume. So you'll license, 5 million, experiences or 10 million experiences or X number transactions versus an actual user count. So we'll have two different ways of licensing it.
I can see that getting a lot of excitement from the customers, that right there, versus the user component.
Yep.
I'll be excited to see when that comes out.
Yeah, we recognize there's two different, there's a lot of different uses for this, but we need at least two different licensing models to support all those different use cases. Question that we'll have is how many transactions do I need to license? And that's the model we're trying to figure out is, do I need 1 million? Do I need 5 million? Do I need, 50 million? So, but yeah, that's to come. Mark, can I real quick ask you, Mark, when Dean went through his slide and he showed the components of DPA and OmniStudio, he showed raptors and integration procedures and flex cards and OmniScripts. With what you just showed us, can you maybe highlight for the audience, what you were showing? Like you were showing various of those pieces. Can you just maybe recap real quick for us what these things we're seeing on the screen are and how they connect to what Dean showed us earlier on his slide?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I've got teed up here. But before I jump into that, do we have a hard stop in 5 minutes, Tina?
Wrap it up pretty closely. Am I going to say
Okay.
exactly on the hour you're done? No, but usually we start losing tons of people because.
Sure. Okay. Let me wrap it up as fast as I can. So, so basically everything that's on the screen that we're looking at here is a flex card. And I want to show you an example of how a flex card is built. As I mentioned, this up in the upper left-hand corner is what's called the contact profile flex card. And I've got this teed up just so that we can jump right to it. If you'll see here, this is the flex card, the tool that is used to build a flex card. So if I click on the map itself and then look over here to the right, you see the image properties. You'll see that the source of that image is the Google API. And basically what we do is we pass the contact mailing address along with some other parameters over to Google, and then Google will then return this map. We also, if you look down here below, each of these address elements. So I've clicked on the home address here. It shows the properties of that. And again, I'm going to click over here on build just for a second so that you get a general idea of what it takes to build this. So this is all drag and drop. So if I just drag, I showed each of these 4 action elements. If I just click on the action element, I can drag that over and then I can specify the properties of that action element. Same thing with fields. If I wanted to add another field for the address, just click on that, drag it onto the palette and specify the properties of that. I can also create a child flex card. So flex cards can have children and grandchildren. So I just grab, again, another flex card element, drag that onto the palette, and so that it's then got a child flex card. So basically the same thing, a text element, if I want to display text on the palette, I can do that as well. Now, one thing I want to get real clear is both the flex card and the OmniScript UI elements that you see when I presented it back there. What I'm showing you is the product of a compiled flex card or OmniScript, which is a Lightning Web component. So that's really a huge advantage that we have. You can deploy the product of what we build from flex cards and OmniScripts anywhere that an LWC can be deployed. So it doesn't even have to be inside Salesforce. It can be deployed to other websites that support the basic Lightning component functionality. So that's the contact profile. If I click on setup here and I look down to the right, we see the data source for this flex card. It's a data raptor and it shows the contact data for interaction. Again, I've got that pulled up just for the sake of time. It shows, so this is the mechanism that is used to feed the flex card that I showed you. So this is a data raptor. and it's showing the criteria that is used to define what data is returned. If I click on the output tab here, I list out all of the fields that I want to be pulled from the Salesforce database. If I click on preview, as Dean mentioned before, we can show exactly what's going to be. It's a little test environment. I go back to the interaction for Alan Barnlett, and I have to go out of. How do I get to the URL? So if I grab the interaction ID and go back to the data raptor and basically say interaction ID equals this one that we were just looking at, and do execute, this is going to return all of the data for that interaction. So this, as we showed in the flex card, this is the data that's displayed. So we only have 1 minute left. I wanted to show you the integration procedure and the OmniScript designer, but I'll just kind of real quickly talk about an integration procedure. So as Dean mentioned, an integration procedure is going to pull data outside of Salesforce, and it can be multiple sources all at once. So this is a huge benefit from a performance perspective. So the server is going to reach out to each of these elements that are in the integration procedure. It could be multiple data raptors, it could be multiple HTTP calls, multiple REST calls. It's going to present that data to whatever calls that integration procedure. So we're at time. Any questions that we can answer real quick?
There's nothing in chat.
Fast.
Oh my goodness. Talk about how OmniStudio makes things fast, and you just demonstrated how fast it is. Really quickly, we need resources, and I don't know if you'll be able to share out the slide deck, but we definitely want the resources for going deeper. And then we'll also post that in our Salesforce Trailblazer community. So
I'm seeing here the OmniStudio on Trailhead. So there's lots of really good trailheads out there.
Nice.
I've listed them here, as well as if you look at the next page here, it shows the URL to get yourself a dev org that has OmniStudio included. So if you want to start playing around with it, this is the URL.
That's new, isn't it? Like,
it is. Yep.
Nice. Very exciting. Are you going to be able to share that slide deck so I can get that published to the community?
Absolutely.
Well, so I'll send you a PDF of the deck, Tina. So yeah, you can send this out, and yeah, we appreciate you inviting us. We really enjoyed chatting with the user group today, and look forward to any questions. By all means, please reach out to us. You can find us on LinkedIn. You can, Tina can connect you with us if you have any specific questions.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I will be broadcasting an email to all of our members when the recording is posted, so people can follow up and also go back and rewatch anything through the demos. So thank you, Rob, Dean, and Mark for being here. I deeply, deeply appreciate that. And thank you for all the guests who joined us today. And we will talk again in January. That will be our next meeting. Stay tuned for those postings. Thanks all. Have a good one.
Got it. Thanks, Tina. Dean,
Bye.
Mark, thank you.